I know, I feel I got it. Recording in progress. Oh.
Hey everyone. Leave it to you, Cherise.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time. Hello, taking the time out of your evening to come to my workshop on defining your story and how to create a pitch perfect press release. So I guess how this evening's going to go, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. So how the first portion of the presentation, I'll introduce myself, tell you a little bit about anamorphic, and then we'll go into the section about how to define your story. And then we'll take a little break and see if there's any questions. I'll probably have a sip of water, and then we'll get into the press release portion. So, hi, my name is Cherise Letson, and for the past 10 years or so, about 10 years, I was a working journalist up here in Canada. I'm actually based in St. John, New Brunswick, which is on the east coast of Canada. And I worked for a variety of publications and outlets such as CBC, the Canadian Press, and more recently in my career, I was working as a business journalist and editor for a publication covering business and entrepreneurship in Atlantic Canada. So I spend a lot of my time, all my time, writing and telling stories of business people and the business climate in the region. And most recently, about a year ago, I joined Anamorphic as their director of content strategy and as an account director. And a little bit about Anamorphic. So Anamorphic is a digital marketing and PR agency based in Toronto. And our mission is to help brands build better business with a digital first public relations, marketing and creative strategy. So that includes everything from creating you an optimized website to media relations, writing press releases. We can do that for you. Social media, everything in between. And we do that. We work with B2B businesses, we work with entrepreneurs, we work with not-for-profit organizations across the world, actually. So throughout my career, both as a journalist and in my current role as a director of content strategy, I've gotten one question asked the most, and that is, how do I get coverage? Or some other form of that question, how do I get noticed? And whether this could be whether if it was a business pitching me as a journalist, or our clients we're working with wanting to get that sweet media coverage, and with good reason, right? Media coverage is a great way to get free exposure for your business or what you're doing. It also provides some legitimacy to your audience. However, media relations is a bit tricky. It's not an exact science, and it could be, sometimes really hard to do. And that's for a variety of factors. For instance, you could have the most perfect story, the perfect pitch ready to go, and the queen dies that day, and your story goes to the bottom of the pile. And the whole newsroom and their resources are covering that, and your pitch might be forgotten, and you might need to follow up, or maybe it gets lost. Another reality is, and I'm sure you may have heard of this over the years, is that newsrooms and publications are shrinking. Traditional publications are really struggling with revenue, and there's been a lot of layoffs, meaning there's less journalists working in these newsrooms, and it also means that there's less reporters specializing in a certain topic. So in the industry, it's known as beats. So there's less people covering the arts, or there's less people covering community stuff or crime, for instance. Well, I guess there's always someone covering crime, because if it bleeds, it leads. But so there's less people kind of specializing in things that aren't super, unless that aren't super timely, right? That are more in the current affairs type of realm. That being said, if you do want to set yourself up for success in pitching media and sharing your story, you need to essentially know your story. And to me, that means you have to be able to talk about yourself in a way that clearly shares who you are and what you do and why they being your target audience, you'll hear me saying that a lot throughout this presentation, your target audience should care. So knowing your story will not only help you pitch media when you're doing that, but also help you with branding yourself overall as an artist or as a business, as an entrepreneur. And it will also help you when you're talking about yourself to potential clients or people you hope to do business with. So over the next hour, we'll talk about defining your story, and we'll take a break and we'll get into the press release part. So defining your story may seem like a daunting task because we think about stories, right? We think of the stories growing up. We think of novels. We think of long New Yorker articles, things like that. But the reality is when in a business context, the first step of, defining and knowing your story is quite simple. It's who you are as a business or an entrepreneur, what you do, and who you do it for. So who you do it for means your customers, the people you want to work with. And you should be able to define this in a relatively short and succinct way. So you should be able to explain who you are and what you do to someone in a short elevator ride. And in the business world, in the startup world, we call it the elevator pitch. I don't think that's exactly what Grover is doing in this photograph, but I chose it because I think it summed up, kind of illustrates what we're chatting about here. So the idea of the elevator pitch is, you end up in the elevator by chance with someone who you will hope to do business with. And you're like, oh my God, they're right here. I need to tell them who I am, what I'm doing, and hopefully they'll work with me. And you need to do it in a short amount of time before they get off on the next floor and they're gone forever. They're like, peace. So and essentially to do this, you need to know sort of who you are, that's what you do, and who you offer, and to who. So it could be, my name is John, and I'm a puppet artist specializing in shows for young children. I'm Cherise, and I'm a business journalist who specializes in entrepreneurship, that type of thing. So it could be as simple as that. You should be able to clearly define and be able to articulate that. And once you're able to articulate that, you can then dive deeper. And this is where we get into the fun stuff. So then you get to think about what additional information adds meaningful context to what you do. So this stuff should highlight what makes you stand out, or your motivations, or what you set out to accomplish with your work, etc. So here are just some examples of what you can think about when you're thinking about your story and how you present yourself and talk about yourself to others. So it could be the subject matter you cover. Do you cover a specific topic? Is all your shows or all your work or your mission tied to a specific subject matter? Who makes up your business or your company? Is it particularly diverse in some way? Like, for instance, is it all women? That would be something that's unique and notable. In the case, in terms of for puppet artists, it's style of puppetry, or how are your puppets constructed? Is there something unique about that that's not typically done by others? That could be something you'd want to highlight. It could be the type of experience you offer. So is your experience of your shows or what you offer immersive? Are you singing the entire time? Is it musicals? Stuff like that. That's, I guess a defining feature is that'd be something you may want to consider highlighting. Do you have a specific mission? For instance, is it to educate or teach your audience about a certain topic through your work? That would be probably an important facet. And another one could be your journey to get to where you are. So is there something of note about your training or your professional background that your audience may find interesting? For instance, say if you've worked on some big name shows or productions, you might want to mention that. Like if you worked on Sesame Street, for instance, that might be something you would want to highlight when chatting about yourself. But the important thing is, it doesn't need to be just one of these. It could be multiple, and it could be things that aren't even listed on here. The idea is to think about, you can even think about what is it that you do better than anyone else? Why have your past clients or, people that you've worked with sought you out? And what makes people, want to come to your shows or performances, those types of things. Those are things that you can draw from to help you dive deeper into your story. But the important thing is, with whatever you choose, you need to think about it through the lens of your target audience. When we're often asked to talk about ourselves, we sometimes go through, some people go back to their childhood, or they go back to, like what they like to do on the weekends. Like, for instance, when I was telling you about myself in the beginning of this presentation, like I could have talked about, I co-host a music podcast. I have 1,000 vinyl records, like sitting behind me. I collect records. Like, that stuff's cool and that's great. But when you're talking to someone you hope to do business with, or when you're talking about your business, the people that you hope to do business with typically won't care about that stuff, right? They care about what you do and how what you do can help them or benefit them. So whenever you're talking about your business or your production company, what have you, always think about what your audience wants. They don't, it's cool that you love kayaking on the weekends and you have a golden retriever, or you have the world's biggest like Beanie Baby collection. Like, it's all cool stuff. And there's probably a time and a place to talk about that, but always tie it back to your audience. And that's sort of like, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, it's kind of like your guiding light, I guess, when talking about your business. So once you have that figured out, and when you think you have those things nailed down, try writing it. So try expressing this in 2 or 3 sentences, maybe 4. I'll give you 4, but you don't want to go more than 4. The idea is play around with words. Is there some puns you can make? Is there some, juxtapositions you can create? But the idea is, and it doesn't need to be fancy, like you don't need to be a wordsmith to do this, but the idea is to be able to clearly state yourself in a clear and succinct way. So again, try to capture that in 2 or 3 sentences. So I'm a visual person, so I created some examples of this and sort of give you an idea of sort of how this could look. So the first example I did was, so John is a puppet artist specializing in educational and entertaining shows for children ages 5 to 12. His shows cover real world topics like divorce and peer pressure in an engaging but digestible way for young audiences. So this demonstrates, so you answer, it's like John, it answers like, who he is, what he does, and what makes him a bit different, right? Again, so he specializes, in shows for children. Cool, a lot of people do that, but what does he do different? It's, he covers real world topics and in a way that's engaging and digestible for those audiences. This is a fun one. This is absolutely not true. I don't think Jessica exists, but this is a great example of sort of doing some wordplay with this, if it's possible. So Jessica is a puppet artist who, after 10 years of creating entertainment for kids on Sesame Street, is now producing raunchy shows for grown-ups. So this is sort of an example of, it's tying in again to when we're talking about those defining, things that add context. Like she worked on Sesame Street, so that's her experience she would maybe want to highlight. And, now she's producing shows for grownups, right? So she's making, shows for the parents now. So that's sort of a clever way to, express kind of who she is, what she's about, and what she does in only 1 sentence. So that's another example. And this one you guys may know. Little Shadow Productions is a production company that showcases puppet-centric performances. The company also offers workshops, courses, and other services designed specifically for puppet artists. This is, again, everyone I've told that I was doing this workshop tonight and who it was for, and I've told them about Little Shadow Productions, they were like, that is so cool. I've never heard of a production company that kind of specializes, and with an emphasis on puppet artists. That's super neat. So that's a way, and I'm sure Jean Marie, you might have, how you describe, talk about the production company. There's probably so much other cool things to say, but this is, this is one way that you can, that could demonstrate, sort of talking about the company. It kind of sums up who it is, what's it about, and what you guys do, and sort of what makes you different. So in the end, it's really things that will make your target audience go, huh, like that's pretty cool. So again, a little math equation for you to sum everything up. That's who you are, plus what you do or offer, plus to who, plus what makes you stand out. Okay, so that was a lot of talking. So next we're on to press releases, but I want to take a pause and see if there's any questions about that first part. I'll totally all good. If not, I know it's always awkward when they're like, is there any questions? And you don't really have any. Cool. Awesome. All right. So now we're going to get into the press release portion. So the reason why I kind of chose a press release for this presentation is the idea of the process of creating one really helps you explore. It's a really great exercise in helping define your story even more. And also there's other aspects of a press release when you have written one can also be repurposed for other parts of promotions and marketing activities that you do as well. And it is, of course, the most common tool and probably the most effective tool to pitch journalists and to get media coverage. Cool. So what is a press release? We'll get to the basics. So a press release is essentially an official statement sent to news media to provide information or make an announcement to the public. So they're often done in government. The government does a lot of them, and you often see them in business, like mergers and acquisitions and things like that. However, they are used in the arts and culture sector quite a bit. Some most common examples that I've seen them used is, like a theater company or production companies announcing like their new season. They will announce, like, the shows that are coming that season, or they have, a special director coming in to join them, or an artist in residence, stuff like that. I'll go into sort of some examples of what would be good topics to write a press release later on, but they are used in arts and culture as well quite a bit. And its main purpose is to help you get coverage from a media publication that reaches your target audience. The idea is to package your story in the most digestible, easy way. So that journalist we talked about earlier that is overworked and doesn't have a lot of time, they'll look at it and they'll be like, sweet, I have all the information I need. This is interesting. This is great. I'm going to give them a call and I'm going to write a story. So why a press release? So press releases are, they're kind of like a DIY tool, and they're very cost effective. Of course, you can hire agencies like Anamorphic to write, we can write press releases for you along with other marketing activities, but you don't need an agency. You don't need necessarily a professional to write one. And also it helps you control your story and call attention to what's important to you. So if you're, when you get coverage for a story, if a journalist does a story on you or on your press release, it's sort of, the narrative is sort of out of your hands at that point, right? They're going to interview you, they have the information, but they're going to write and tell the story how they see fit, unless it's sponsored content and you paid for it. But yeah, so the press release is sort of a way that you can kind of tell your story in a way and emphasize what's important to you. And it's sort of like its statement of record in a way. And again, it simplifies the journalist's life by giving them the content they can use or repurpose. Often people may be surprised, like they're like, oh, a journalist they weren't interested. They never got back to me, but they look and they check the newspaper and, they wrote a news brief on it, or they did kind of a rewrite on it because it was easy and they had all the information they need and like, okay, sweet, I'll do this. So the idea is, having a nice package for the journalists. And the idea is if you make the journalist's life easier, the easier it will be for you to get media coverage. So when should you write a press release? So this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of people. And it's the fact is, just because you exist doesn't mean your story. I'm sorry. We all have a story to tell, but it doesn't mean that a journalist is going to cover you. There's a lot of other great ways to tell your story. So if you don't, like, you send out a press release and it doesn't get picked up by any journalist, it's not the be all end all. There's many other ways to get your name out there, such as having an optimized website, or having a really strong content marketing strategy and utilizing, your blog and your social media, having a strong social media strategy, partnering with others like artists in your space, and kind of boosting each other up with your followings. There's digital advertising, traditional advertising. These are all ways they're all part of a comprehensive marketing strategy, and they're all other ways to get your name out there quite effectively without media coverage. Media coverage, in a way, in the press release is sort of like a small little portion of, that should be your overall marketing strategy. So when should you write a press release? It's really when you have something new to share, when you have something going on. In essence, the news is somebody doing something, right? So here are some examples of, some situations where you might want to write a press release for. So a new show or season, as I mentioned earlier, that's a very common one in the arts and culture space. You've welcomed a new team or cast member or director. You won an award of some kind. You're launching a contest or initiative. You're rebranding your business. You're hosting an event. You're celebrating a significant milestone, or you're partnering with someone, whether it be, an organization, business, or charity. Again, not limited to this at all, but again, it's sort of something significant that would be of interest to your audience. And again, tying it back to your target audience, would they care and why? So we got that covered. So I think to illustrate, I'm going to take you through kind of the step-by-step process on how to write a press release. So to do that, I created a totally fictional scenario that I put way too much thought in for a very real famous individual. We're going to chat about Miss Piggy tonight, and we're going to help her write a press release for her new initiative. So what's up with Miss Piggy? So Miss Piggy is touring local schools in New York City with her new show, Miss Piggy, #NoFilterNeeded. The show aims to help kids deal with the challenges and pressures they face on social media. And it's also the first time in her very long career that she's embarked on a school tour. Again, I don't know that. I just use this as I put way too much time into this example, but that's what she's doing in this case. And she's looking to get coverage in publications, particularly in the New York area, that have an arts and culture section. So later on this presentation, I'll give you some notes on sort of how you can identify which publications you should pitch. But in this case, Miss Piggy was very direct. She let me know. She's like, I need to be in those New York publications with arts and culture coverage. And I'm like, okay, I got you. So the first step in the press release is the headline. So think of this is pretty self-explanatory. Think of it like a headline in a news story. So it needs to announce a story. It has to kind of capture the attention in some way, but it also needs to convey value. So it needs to kind of sum up what the story is. So, and this is the only portion of the presentation where I asked for audience participation. But I would love your help in choosing a headline for this press release. So I drafted 3 headlines, and I'd like to go through them with you and get your thoughts on which one's the strongest. So the first one is Muppet Show star Miss Piggy's new show tackles the pressures of social media. Muppet Show star Miss Piggy's first ever school tour will show the kids there's no filter needed. And Miss Piggy helps kids deal with the pressures of social media with new show. So those are the 3 I've drafted up. Does anyone have any thoughts on which one's the strongest or which one we should go with? All right, Jean-Marie, 2. Any other guesses? So I have 1 vote for 2. 1. No, you're 1. Okay, we got 1 for 1. Okay. So the answer is Jean Marie, number 2. So first of all, I will say, no matter which one you thought, none of these are wrong and none of these are incorrect in any way. But the reason why number 2 is the strongest is because it demonstrates what the news is, like part of what the news is. So again, well, first of all, it does say who it is: Muppet Show star Miss Piggy. We need that in there. And then, the first ever school show. So again, that's a piece of news. She's never done this before. And it incorporates, it has that fun, like it captures your attention, like it incorporates the name of the show within it. So no filter needed. It's a really cool way to kind of work that in seamlessly. So that's the one I would go with. However, none of these are particularly wrong, but when you are writing a headline, try to think of always think of kind of opportunities to kind of make it add a little punch to it. So step number 2 in writing a press release would be the subtitle. So this goes right below the headline, and it's a lot less sexy, but it is important. So basically the subtitle quickly summarizes the story, and it kind of gives a glimpse or a preview of what the content will cover. So basically the purpose of this is a journalist, they read the headline, they're like, okay, no filter needed. What the hell? Is this Instagram? And they're going to be like, oh, okay, this is what it's about. Miss Piggy, she's doing the show. Okay, so here's what we drafted up for Miss Piggy's subtitle. Very simple. For the first time in your career, Miss Piggy will be touring schools throughout New York City with a new show that focuses on helping kids deal with the challenging pressures brought on by social media. There it is. It doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need to try to make any puns. Just, it's really straight, clear, and to the point of what this press release is about. Step number 3 is the opening. So this gives you the high level who, what, when, where, and why. So typically the opening line of press releases follow this format. So you have all caps the city, so the city that the news is based or taking place in. You have the date, so the month and the day and the year. Then you have an M dash, little long dash that always takes me a million tries to find to do on my keyboard. And then you have name of company or whoever it is announced today, and then followed by the who, what, when, where, and why of your story. So again, you typically don't need to, this is kind of the traditional format of it, but you don't necessarily have to do the announce today if you don't want to. You can play around. I always love when there's a snappy first opening line. However, if you want to keep it simple, this is the traditional great way to do it. And that's the way that Miss Piggy wanted this done. So New York, October 1st, 2022. Miss Piggy, iconic star of the legendary Muppet Show, announced today her first ever school tour with her new show, Miss Piggy, No Filter Needed. The show aims to help kids navigate the challenges and pressure they face in the world of social media. There we go, the who, what, when, where, and why. And then we get to the good part. We get to the body of the press release. So press releases typically should not be more than a page in most cases. So the body of your release should only be about 2 or 3 paragraphs. And here you will include sort of your essential information. So this could be, depending on what your news is, past milestones, events, start dates, locations, statistics, any research, that sort of thing. The idea is basically to provide additional context that a journalist may want to use, or they may need to write a story about this or prepare for an interview with you. And again, the idea is to have this information to be of use to the journalist. So again, you focus on, again, your target audience and in the news here. This is not the spot to talk about your hobbies or what you do in your spare time or anything else. You only have a limited space. So you really want to focus on sort of what's important and what the journalists and therefore your audience you're hoping to reach needs to know about this. So I've written 3 body paragraphs for Miss Piggy, and I'm going to go through each one and I'm going to sort of highlight sort of what each demonstrates and why it's included. So paragraph number 1. Miss Piggy was inspired to write and produce the show while stuck at home during the COVID-19 pandemic. She drew inspiration from her nephews, Andy and Randy, who shared their frustrations around the pressures to show off and look a certain way online by their peers. The show covers topics such as body image, flex culture, and bullying. So this first paragraph demonstrates, and it will essentially answer some big questions. So when what's a journalist going to want to know when they hear about this? One of the questions, they and the audience is going to have is, what made Miss Piggy want to do this? Like, what is this? Why? So this answers that question, where she got her inspiration from and how this project got started. And it also answers the question a little bit, gives more details about the show's content. So, okay, pressures on social media, what pressures? What does that even mean? So again, covers, the show covers topics such as body image, flex culture, and bullying. And that is a lot of information in two sentences, right? So there you go. So again, being selective and thoughtful about the information that you'll be including. In the second paragraph, so after writing the script, Miss Piggy recruited performers Dave Goles, Frank Oz, and Fran Bill to join the cast, and rehearsals began. The show has been booked by schools throughout New York City, with the first show kicking off October 5th at Battery Park City School in Brooklyn. So again, a lot of information packed into this. So it demonstrates sort of, okay, a show's coming, a show's been announced. A question that, people will probably want to know is, who else is in it? Is it just Miss Piggy? Who did she recruit to do this? So it mentions the other performers. And, it also answers, so where is it being performed? It's going to be performed at schools in New York City. The first show is happening at this time. So again, when's it starting and where? And there you have that, all that information in two sentences. And then we have the third and final paragraph, which is, people may be surprised to learn that a star like Miss Piggy, who's known for performing at venues like Carnegie Hall and the Lincoln Center, would be touring elementary schools. But she says the pandemic made her want to reconnect with her roots and produce a piece of work that will both entertain and help others. So this paragraph demonstrates, again, it adds a bit more insight into why this is happening, what's going on. It also ties into her past accomplishments. Like, again, as I mentioned, one of the things you might want to highlight is, milestones. So, it highlights her, what she's done before, right? Where she's performed, what she's known for. And it really kind of reinforces the significance of what she's doing, right? And it also sets up for the next part, the next step in writing a press release, which is the quote. So the purpose of the quote is to add color to the release. So it could be a quote from the subject involved. So for instance, if you're announcing a new director to your team, you might want to have a quote from them or your new team member. It could also be, depending on what the release is and what the news is, an opportunity to highlight testimonials from, previous clients. For instance, if you're in the case of a school show or something like that, you might want to have a quote from, a principal from a school that you performed at before, being like, they were fantastic. It was a great show. The kids were engaged. Like, we loved it. This could be, that's just an example, but, this could be a good spot to highlight that as well. Or it could simply be a quote from yourself about what this news means to you and to your potential clients. But the idea is to kind of build on what's been already said in the press release. Nothing is worse than having like a quote that's literally just repeating the paragraph before. Add some color, add some oomph, right, into the story, while also staying on the topic at hand. So I went to Miss Piggy, and she never disappoints. And this is the quote she gave me. "When you're a star like moi, it's important to use your talent and platform for good," said Miss Piggy. "I hope No Filter Needed shows kids that they're a star in their own unique way, and they shouldn't let people's highlight reels on social media make them feel less." There you go, said like a true queen. The quote like this, it demonstrates, again, it adds color, it adds more perspective to what's going on, while still, it's about the show, right? She's not talking about like what she ate for breakfast, or like what she's doing this weekend, or like what she, it's kind of, it's staying on the mission of the show and what she wants people to know about it. And that's sort of what you should use your quote for, is to, again, reinforce your mission. And then we're bringing it all back home with the closing, the final step in writing your press release. So the closing, a line or two, reinforcing essentially what makes this newsworthy. You also want to include a brief description at the end. It's kind of like its own separate section. You'll see just about you and your company. That little exercise I made you do in part 1 about, defining yourself in 3 sentences. This would be the perfect spot for it. And also you need to point to people where they can learn more about this news or about your business or yourself. So you'd want to hyperlink your website and perhaps your social media channels. And you also want to include a contact for an interview. So this could be yourself, or if it's for an organization of some kind, it would need to be someone on your team. So someone a journalist can call and be like, hey, yeah, I want to talk to someone about this, and this person can coordinate the interviews. So it is really important for whoever you make your contact in a press release to make sure that they have the capacity to take that job on, because journalists are on deadlines. And if no one's getting back to them in time, and the story to them is going to look like it's falling through, and they're going to move on to something else. So it's important that you have someone there, or if it's you have the capacity to, you're kind of on standby, you have your notifications on to respond to requests in a timely manner. So closing for Miss Piggy's release. Miss Piggy is excited to embark on her first ever school tour of New York City. Again, that's the news, makes it newsworthy, and has plans in the works to bring the show on a national school tour. So you don't need to include this, of course, but if there's an opportunity to tease out more news or tease, an expansion of some kind, or sort of what's next, closing would be kind of a good place to put it as well. There you go. Press inquiries, I'm her press agent. Please don't email this address or call this number. I don't know whose Pulse Porso's number this is. This is purely for example, but this is sort of how you would position it. So interview inquiries, your contact, their email, and their phone number. That's all you need. And then about Miss Piggy. So this is where you would put your little section that about yourself and what you do, your little story here. So for Miss Piggy, she doesn't need much of an introduction, but what she's known for, her key highlights, her accolades, etc. So I broke it down in steps, and you put all these steps together and you have your press release. It seems like a lot, and I did talk a lot, but when you put it all together, it's quite short, and you know what I mean? And it's brief, but it packs a whole lot of information. Cool. So, did you have a question, Jean Marie? Oh, sorry. I saw your hand going. All good. Cool. So we have your press release, and now it's time to send it out. We need to make it sure that Bert and Ernie read this in the paper. Well, maybe not the paper, but somewhere else. So when it comes to identifying, which media publications to pitch, it's important, again, you tie it back to your target audience. So the people you want to reach with this news, what publications are they reading? So again, this could be your local newspaper. It could be digital publications in the space or in the sector. It could be local bloggers, like for instance, if there's an entertainment blogger, or a theater blogger, or theater critic, that type of things, like in that space. They might be media outlets you might want to pitch as well. There's also, of course, radio stations that especially radio stations that do arts coverage or current affairs coverage. I know up here in Canada, it's CBC. I don't know if there's an NPR, a local station of that sort in your area that does that, but those are sort of some examples. Trade publications are another one. As I've learned, no matter how niche the industry is, there is some sort of publication online or print that specializes in it. So trade publications are another one as well. And again, there's also regional and national publications with an arts and culture department in the case of, theater and creative spaces. However, one thing to note is with national publications, typically they look for stories that are either of a national interest or have a national scope. So if your news is sort of really centered in, a particular community or area or region, you'll probably have more luck targeting publications like in your area. Oh, is there a question?
Yes, instead of just doing a general broad web search, are there particular places that we can go to find these things quicker?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I guess in terms, what industry are you thinking?
Well,
Like what?
I'm just wondering if there are places that are services to other
Hmm.
news reporters. It seems like the news reporters would have access to something instead of just doing a general web search all the time.
Oh, news report. Oh, so you mean like if a journalist is looking for outlets, or for you, like if you're looking for outlets to pitch?
Well, a resource. There's so many websites that have collected resources under their umbrella to help people with things. Just
Yeah.
like puppet organizations will have all these puppet resources. So, is there some umbrella place that we can go to help find all these things, or are we just stuck to typing random specific search phrases on
Yeah,
there?
no, there are some tools out there that journalists use. The one that comes to mind that we use at Anamorphic is called Meltwater. So it is a paid service that we use, that we can actually find like journalist databases and and from there it covers from reporters for national publications to regional niche publications, lifestyle bloggers even. It is a it is a paid resource, but it is a good question. I can why don't like I can leave that with me, and I'll do some research myself, and I'll ask my team, and I can follow up with Jean Marie if that works, and see if there is a resource sort of for all the publications, especially in the US. But I guess, like, honestly, I think you mentioned like kind of just go being, just Google searching. That actually might be like, it's actually probably an effective way. So if you type in, if you type in, a region, or a type of, an area that you hope to cover, or, jurisdiction, you'll probably come up. Or you could type in, bloggers in, like, theater, for example, theater bloggers in Brooklyn, right? There's probably, like, Google's really good at picking up, like, generating those types of results. But that is a good question. So leave that with, if it's cool, if you leave that with me, I can see if there's
And
some.
how do you spell the one that you had said?
Oh, Meltwater. So Meltwater.
Okay.
Meltwater.
All
And there's
right.
a few other, so it's a media monitoring service, I believe. And so we use it, like, on our end to monitor coverage for our clients. So it's also would be a good tool as well, like, to see if a release got picked up, or if other public like a news release was picked up. It's a really powerful tool for that. And you can get really specific with their searches. However, it's not a super cheap option, but I know what my colleague does as well, like, in addition to Meltwater, is setting up Google News searches, which is really great too. So you can set up keywords for certain industries. Like, if we have a client in the food and beverage sector, right, we'll like set news alerts for certain keywords, certain titles, certain organizations. And when those come up, we can see, like, where they're mentioned in the media. So that's another way as well. So Google News is quite powerful too. Cool. So yeah, so the next step is, so once you identify your outlets, it's how you pitch. So first step is to find the appropriate editor or reporter at the publication you want to pitch. On a lot of organizations, if you reach out to the editor will get it and they will assign it. However, reporters on the same coin, they love getting pitches, because they need, editors want pitches as well. You're supposed to pitch your own stories. So you can go either way, or you can go pitch both. So the best way to find the appropriate editor is, if it's on a physical print publication, usually on, like, the first couple pages, there's like a masthead with, like, all the editorial team, their contact information's there. Or online, they'll probably have a contact us, or about us, or pitch us, or submit your story idea page. You'll often find the contact information there. For a reporter, so if you want to find the right reporter to pitch at a publication, say it's not super specialized, it's more of a general news publication, go to kind of the arts or community section, wherever you believe your story will fit, and look at those reporters who are covering those stories, and see whose name you see most often. And when you find someone, go to the bottom of a lot of publications these days, at the bottom of the article, they'll have like a little bio for the reporter and their contact info. You'll find it there. Or alternatively, you can find them on Twitter. I guarantee every single journalist is on Twitter. I'm a recovering journalist and I'm on Twitter, not as much these days, but we were all on there. So often a lot of journalists will have their email or contact info in their bio because they're totally open to pitches. So that's another a way to get their contact information as well. The second step is you want to make it as personal as possible. Nothing is worse than getting a pitch from someone and it's just like, hi, and then it's like brackets, insert name. Like they didn't even bother to like put my name when they sent me the story. So use their name and also find ways to make it personal, like compliment, and I'll demonstrate this in my example, but mention something like what you liked about their previous coverage around this subject matter or in this area. Kind of build a relation, like kind of make it personable. I always use this as an example. My favorite PR lady when I was a business journalist, she had always asked me how my cat was doing, and she knew my cat's name and how, what I mean? She'd be like, oh, how is Dylan? Like, it was super great. You build that relationship. And I always, it was cool. It was very sweet. And so I always, even if I didn't cover what she had to say, I gave, I was like, okay, like I gave her the time and I listened to it, and I'd find, I'd be like, okay, maybe not right now, but maybe next week, I'd kind of, it built that really good relationship. And if you can build a relationship with a journalist, it's golden. It's great. You also, of course, you don't just want to fluff them up. You also want to explain briefly, but clearly why the story would be of interest to them. So again, they're like, okay, that's nice, but why should I care? Why would our audience care? So you want to make sure that's very clear in your email as well. You also want to, and our recommendation is to put the press release, literally copy and paste it into the body of the email. So a lot of press releases these days are still sent, like they're sent as Word attachments, which isn't wrong. However, we recommend sending press releases in the body of the email. At the very end, you could be like, attached below is the press release. We recommend putting it in the body of the email because a lot of organizations these days, attachments from unknown senders or first-time senders go into the spam folder, and they'll be totally missed. And most times, it's not often that people check that, right? So you don't want it to get missed. And it's also good because, again, it makes the journalist's lives easier in the sense that they don't need to download an attachment and like open another window and clutter their desktop even more. It's already there and they can read it. And it's, if they want to pull from it for their story, they just need to simply open the email and copy and paste kind of the key information. In terms of the subject line of your pitch email, very simple, to the point. So something like story idea, colon, and then 3 or 4 words about kind of what's in the press release. So in this case, it'd be story idea, Miss Piggy launching, first school tour with new show, something like that. Again, it doesn't need to be super clickbaity, like catchy or anything like that. If you can, sure, but make sure it's, it's clear what the release is. So here's a totally fictional example I made up that sort of, demonstrates a good pitch email. So this is to Jane, who works at the New York Times. So, hi, Jane. I'm reaching out today with a story idea that may be of interest to the New York Times readership. Again, so just a line saying, hi, Jane, this is why you don't know me, but this is why I'm contacting you. She'll be like, yeah, okay. Muppet Show star Miss Piggy is launching her first ever school tour of her new show, No Filter Needed. The show aims to help kids navigate the challenges and pressures put on by social media. Again, who, what, when, where, and why. Bam, that's what it is. And this is where I butter her up. Well, kind of. So I've loved your coverage of Miss Piggy's previous performances at Carnegie Hall and the Lincoln Center in the past, and wanted to offer you this opportunity to chat with her about this exciting news. So again, I'm referring to past coverage she done. So this Jane has covered Miss Piggy's events and initiatives in the past. So I give, kind of letting her know, hey, I know you've done this. So in this case, it could be like, even if they haven't covered your subject matter or anything, you could be, oh, I loved your coverage on this show that was done, or I loved your coverage on or it could be as general as like, I love the community, like the coverage you do, like in our community, I particularly love this story. It doesn't need to be exactly tied, but just kind of show that you did research on them and you're reaching out to them for a reason. And then the way I put it as like, I'm offering you this opportunity to chat. So if you pose it as an opportunity, in some cases, it might get you a little far, in case, talking to Miss Piggy is an opportunity. And then I've included their press release below for more details. If you'd like to arrange an interview with Miss Piggy, please reach out to me and we can schedule a time. She has availability to chat this Thursday and Friday from noon onwards. So again, I have the press release. That's where you can find it. If you'd like to arrange an interview, please contact me. So again, very clear instructions on how she can arrange it. And I also included the availability. So if this is a good tactic. Oh, hi. Question?
Okay. And so once again, like you said earlier, you're putting the press release so below your thank you line, your signature.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
as an attachment, like you said.
Not as attachment. No, like they'll be able to see it. Like if they say it's below, they'll see it continued. You could too as well. I've seen it done like after noon onwards. You could after noon onwards, you could attach the press release there and then you can have your closing. Thanks so much. But yeah, having it in the body of the email is typically it's a recommendation. However, if you do want to send it as an attachment, like there's nothing wrong, like it's still done all the time, but typically that's what we recommend our clients to do, just for the sake of making sure it gets into the inbox and you don't have to worry.
Yeah, it just surprised me a little bit that you had the thank you and then your name, but it makes sense. So that way they can just copy and paste the bottom part.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, it's like, it's interesting because I was chatting for this presentation with my colleague Monta, who does a lot of the, her and I both do a lot of the media relations, but she does a lot of the media outreach. And I asked him like, is it like, do people send, is there a recommended, like, cause I've always most of the time gotten attachment, like I got a mixture of both. Right. And I was like, is there a preference? Like, is there like, what do you typically do and why? And she was like, body of the email. And I'm like, interesting. And she was like, because, and I'm like, that makes so much sense because I remember once in a while, like looking through my spam folder and I've actually missed really good story opportunities because they went into my junk folder. So it's not it's not unprofessional in any way to have it in the body of the email. In fact, it makes things more simple. If for some reason they wanted a Word document version, I'm sure they'll reach out. But yeah, typically the body of the email should suffice. So with this last line about the availability, this is a good tactic a strategy to use in the sense that, first of all, it gives a clear idea of when the availability, when you're available to chat or when your subject is available to chat. So a journalist is reading this, they're like, okay, they're available Thursday, Friday. What do I have going on Thursday and Friday? That's in 2 days. Okay. Yeah, no. All right. I'm free. I'll book a time. It also adds a bit of urgency as well. Like, okay, if you want to chat and if you want to do this is when they're available. Like it kind of subconsciously adds a little bit of that timeliness and that urgency. Thank you. Thanks so much. Cherise Letson, and in the release I'd put at the bottom. You can also to your point as well, if you want to make it really clear, like I've attached the press release, I've included the press release at the bottom of this email, if you want to be really specific about it in case they miss it, but that's where I'd put it in this case. Cool. And then you hit send and then off she goes. So that concludes my presentation. I feel like I've talked for a while. I know we're coming close on to the hour here, but we have some time for a few questions if there's any. If not, or if you think of something after, this is my contact info. And there's anamorphic.com if you want to learn more about Anamorphic and what we do, and you can find us on social. And thank you all so much for taking the time out of your evening, and thank you, Jean Marie, for hosting me, and thank you for your great questions.
I have a question. Do you ever include a photo with the press release, so some eye candy?
Mm-hmm. So that's also great too. If you have a photo, that's a great question. Yeah, if you have a photo, you can definitely include it. If a photo that it could be a photo of yourself, or if there's a photo of the production or something related to the news, absolutely include it. I would say in terms of a photo, you could include it in the, I wouldn't put it in the body of the email, just because I know for a fact there needs to be a certain, like when you add the images to the body of the email, it typically like really reduces the quality, I guess, of it. So attaching it perhaps as a photo in the email would suffice. Or you can say, we also have photos available if you'd like one. And then that way you're not risking going into the spam folder and they'd be like, oh, sweet, you have a photo. They'd be like, yeah, can you send that photo along? And you can send it along. So you could actually let them know, like, we have some photos or video, like if you have a video, like other resources, that anything you need, just reach out. Hey, Marie.
So I worked with a PR group for years that I don't work with anymore,
Mhm.
but just because it's expensive. But
Yeah.
but I'm still on their mailing list, like as a press person. And
Oh.
that happened originally because we were looking for synergy for certain projects, and so like it made sense that I was on this list. But I've noticed that recently in their press releases, like they have a note, they have their press release, and then in there's like a link so that you could go to the photos or you could go to the video or anything like that. Does
That's
that send you into a spam folder?
I don't think so. Like, I think it's more so it depends, I guess, on your email host, and also depends on like their organization's like firewall and cybersecurity
Yeah.
perhaps,
Okay.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can say to that, working with my one client, I had to totally change the way these automated emails went out. I mean, people, they wanted them, they were about bids, but Google had this thing about URLs. So I am always a little hesitant. I don't know if it makes any difference, but I always square bracket them. But yeah, they didn't like, yeah. And I did have another quick question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Don't mind. But yeah, look up, but you might look up Google. It's like Google anti-spam policy, things like that with Google Gmail. And I'm sure they update that every so often. Um, well, I've seen it on different websites where they post their press releases, but I'm also wondering how useful it is to put on social media. I knew, Facebook, they don't know, everybody doesn't always get what you post, but is there any point to put it in on some social media in some way?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Definitely. So I absolutely recommend posting your press release to your website, like if your client or organization has a website, like as a blog. And I'd probably recommend then like sort of sharing it as a link on social, or I think when it comes to posting on social media, you should always keep sort of the purpose and like the medium of the platform in mind. So for instance, LinkedIn. So LinkedIn nowadays, they're really favoring kind of the long form type of content, like, the articles feature. So that would actually be a great like LinkedIn article, right? That press release. For Instagram, for instance, like Instagram is visual, right? So, and it's also really heavy on video now too. Like they're really pushing the video aspect. So it might be, or Instagram stories. So it might be kind of sharing the news like in an Instagram story, really visually, and then having a link to the press release. For Facebook, again, like you could probably, yeah, again, like share the link from your website, because that way, if they're clicking on your website or your client's website, they're already on their page, and it's bringing them right to their website to learn more about them and where they can contact them. So really, when you're posting on social media, you should absolutely repurpose the press release and the news, but I'd be conscious of sort of thinking about what the best, like kind of utilizing the platforms to the best of their ability, and not just sort of copying pasting like the press release as like a status update.
And could I also ask on that, so since you're limiting information, use the headline and then what, the first paragraph?
In terms of
Like if you want to give them a little snippet on there, so you say, for instance, you're doing a Facebook post and you're going to link off to the website.
yeah.
So I would assume you use the headline that you have, but then what would you do? Just use like the first paragraph of the press release and then for more.
Yeah, you could do that. You'd be like, and to find out more, or you can make it depending on, you know, the organization or the client and sort of their presence and voice. Like you could be like, we have some super exciting news to share that's going to change XYZ, you know, sort of build it up, kind of state kind of what's the significance of the news and sort of why, again, kind of back to the why, reinforcing the why the audience should care. And like, we're super pumped. And you can maybe have a little few sentences kind of describing it. It's kind of like the subtitle in a way. And then you could be like, read more on our website, like come read more to find out more. That's how I would do it. Again, sort of the, you know, kind of tailor the language. Like you have your press release, which is sort of like your anchor, like your guide. So when you're kind of repurposing it for social media, feel free to, you know, tailor the language or the format to best suit the platform, because that way it's going to probably perform much better that way. Amazing.
Well, Cherise, thank you so much. This was really jam-packed with really great information. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm like, oh, I talked so much. I'm gonna finish this bottle of water. Thank you. Thank you all so much again for joining me. And again, feel free to reach out anytime if you want to chat more about this stuff. I love it. So
Thank you. Your slides are very helpful.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and have a good evening.
You too.
Right,
And thanks for having it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
First, I'll send you the recording shortly.
Amazing. Perfect. Thanks so much.
Bye, y'all.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.